Hey, welcome to the JD Oliva Project. I'm JD Oliva, and I was not planning on doing this until maybe 5, 6 minutes ago. Like, this is total spur of the moment thing. Big news tonight. CM Punk is back in WWE, right? Huge shock if I'm telling it to you. This is going to be something everybody's going to talk about. You're going to hear a million different takes on what's going on, whether it's good or bad for pro wrestling, yada, yada, yada. I feel like we've been here before, right? I feel like this is a conversation that we've all had, and it's been a wild year as far as Mr. Punk goes. So, here's the thing. I don't know how to think about this right now as far as like where my podcaster brain should go. I know as a fan that this happened 7 years ago when I was still following WWE actively. I'd have been pretty stoked. 2 years ago when he came to AEW, the promotion that I liked watching most, I was really excited. Like, I had my tickets to the first dance, and I thought this could be the start of something. And it was. And it's weird. We're just over we're not even 2.5 years later. It's two and a quarter years later. He's back in WWE. It's so it's so wild to think about the last 2 years and kind of where we've gone with all this. Like, it's baffling, really. Like, life moves fast. Um, if I was more into the WWE product, and I'll be honest with you, there's been a lot of times over the last 6 months that I've thought to myself, "Man, I should start watching WWE again." And then I remember I lost a bet to my buddy Scott on, when we were still on the old Fight Game Network, and I watched some Raws, and I was just like, "Oh god, this show is just like 3 hours of WWE TV, just it breaks my soul." But I thought, "Hey, maybe I could watch some of the, some of the PLEs." Even though Vince is gone, I just do not like this company. I don't like the way they do their matches. I don't like the production. I don't like I don't like the way the company feels. And then they go out and do the Saudi Arabian propaganda campaigns, and I just makes me nauseous. Like, I feel dirty just talking about it. Like, it's gonna crack me up the day that WWE Twitter posts X, excuse me, posts a link of CM Punk saying, "I'm CM Punk, voice of the voiceless, but I never feel voiceless when I fly Saudi Air." It just because that's coming, and you know that they're all just a bunch of carny workers anyway, so they'll do it. Like, he's no different. Like, it just this whole thing is wild, and I want to check back in 6 months and see where we're at. That's not why I want to do this show today. Um, it's so funny because I went into, multiple Discords and Slack channels and stuff like that. I belong to as a wrestling thing, belong to a bunch of them. And I saw so many of the AEW fans like writing obituaries and epitaphs for that company, saying this is it, they're over, it's done. And like it's humorous to me because honestly, this definitely couldn't have happened at a worse time for them. But think about it like this: like, you fire a guy, you say this guy is no good to us. We hate it. We don't want him here. And then he goes somewhere else, and people go, "Psst, you screwed up." Like, and at the same time, maybe those people are right. Maybe this isn't the end of AEW, but there's no way to spin it positively, right? I think it ultimately comes down to leadership. And Mike and I have talked about Tony Khan's style of leadership before on our show. Mike and I come from, I don't want to say vastly different worlds because we kind of grew up, I don't know, maybe a little similar, maybe, I don't know. It's hard to say, both have some similar interests and stuff like that. But like, I'm a high school wrestling coach and have been doing that for 20 years. So I've been, in charge of 14 to 18-year-old young men since I graduated from college. And Mike is an officer, of course. He clearly leads older young men on a much more important stage than I do. But, it's still the same. We still have very similar views on the ideas of leadership. And I think that when I'm watching this whole thing go down tonight, all I can think about is like, wow, like this was set in motion 2 years ago, right? Not just him coming to AEW, but like Punk coming to AEW specifically. But what really kind of sets this in motion is that it's pre-brawl out, right? The trouble, and I got a buddy of mine who started pointing him out. I always leave him nameless because I don't want to get him in trouble. So I'm gonna say I got a buddy of mine who started pointing me out to this around Double or Nothing. of 2022 that there were problems in AEW. And like because I was largely enjoying the product up to that point, I kind of ignored them. Double or Nothing 2022 is a weird pay-per-view. It's the first time that like I know MJF's Pillman-esque bullshit kind of hijacked the show, and it really kind of set in course a kind of a really bad summer of 2022 that AEW had, and followed by a worse one this year. Um, but a lot of we go back to this when we look at the issues started with the Colt Cabana thing. Was Colt Cabana fired? Was he moved off to AEW, to ROH to appease Punk? Blah blah blah. And then like the whole thing kind of boils over at the Brawl Out press conference. And what's hilarious is that you can clearly see that Punk really didn't respect the work that AEW had done prior to him, because he kind of buried everybody. He didn't kind of very clearly buried everybody. And what bothered me the most with it, and Mike and I talked about this, when it happened, is how he just sat there and took it, right? He just sat there and nodded along and didn't say a word. And that's really what this kind of, again, this is what really got me to think about, this was a year ago, mind you, that this guy really is a poor leader, right? Because he came out and said, yeah, that was never the case. And I'm like, okay, why didn't you do this before? Like, why don't you say this to your people? Why isn't this like a big, not like a big, you have these backstage meetings, right? Why don't you say, hey man, I'm hearing some bullshit. This is not true, or this is true. This is how we're going to deal with it. Like a man who wants to be friends with everyone has no friends, right? Like you can't do that. You can't be a leader and not upset people. You can't be a leader and have everybody talk about how wonderful of a person you are, because it doesn't work that way. Being a leader is making tough choices. It's that Solomon's baby moment, right? When you're going to cut the baby, well, you got to make a choice. You got to cut one hand. You got to make a choice, right? And sometimes, and again, that's just a parable, but that story holds meaning, is that in life we have tough choices. And if you avoid making tough choices to try to make everybody happy, in the end, you make nobody happy, or you make your enemies happy. And in this world, there are enemies. There are people who don't like each other. And that's what happened here, is like Tony Khan's consistent ability to be a leader and get out in front of issues before they fester has been a massive problem here, right? Starting with the Colt Cabana thing, right? He should have said, yeah, you know what? Punk is the guy who's driving up our profits right now. He don't want Colt around. This is what we're going to do. This is how it has to be. Or if that's not true, just say, no, that's not what we're doing. Here's how it's going to go. And if you have a problem with it, take it up with me. Let's talk about it. Let's handle this. Right. That's the issue, is there's never a, hey, let's talk about it. Let's handle this. Like when the Brawl Out situation happened, that fight came down because there was no one, the people weren't talking to each other. They were talking behind their backs. They were being super passive aggressive and not talking, not having tough conversations. Tough conversations is how things get fixed, right? We talk about that all the time. Like when you're trying to figure out how to fix a problem, right? Whether it's, hey, this guy's got bad technique, whether it's, hey, this situation here isn't working, was, hey, we're failing. Why? Why is this happening? We have to tell people. You have to get down to the root of the problem. You have to sit your people down and you have to say, okay, this is what's happening. This is how we're going to fix it. And it doesn't even have to be from the leader figuring out how to fix everything. You can have a powwow. You can have I shouldn't have said that. You can have a meeting with all your people and figure out a plan. But that's on the leader to say, this is how we're going to implement it, right? And this is how we go forward. And Tony Khan hasn't done that. You still got Andrade out here being super passive aggressive on Twitter, right? Okay, cool. You're proud of CM Punk bullshit. Like you're also bitching about not being on pay-per-views. Why he keeps these people around is astonishing to me. Like just so you can keep them away from WWE. Like they can't, like you can't have everybody under roster, and that's both companies, right? Like you don't need to just play keep away from talent because you're afraid. Because again, you're afraid of having this failure. Oh, this guy didn't work here, so it's a failure on me. Like, who cares, dude? Like, who really cares? And ultimately, I think it was a humongous failure on his part when Punk did come back, when that surgery was over, to not get everyone together and say, hey, how can we fix this? And more importantly, how can we make money off this? And I heard a lot of people say it is not in the Bucks' interest to work with CM Punk. They don't make any extra money by working with them. That is accurate. But you know who would it be in the best interest of? All Elite Wrestling. It would have been in their best interest if CM Punk and the Young Bucks can work together. Because what did it lead to? Punk has his own show, had his own show on Saturdays that now is superfluous, right? It's just another show getting really bad ratings. And it probably would have been that way with CM Punk anyway. But we had to create this show because we can't have we couldn't have these people in the same room. Why the fuck not? These are adults. These are freaking adults. If you can't sit down and have a conversation and figure out how to be a professional and work with somebody, then you don't deserve a job. And I'm talking about everybody. That's everybody in this situation. Like, that's how the real world functions. You work with people you don't get along with. You don't have to like everybody, but you got to figure out a way to be successful. Right? You could say, well, it's not in the Bucks' best interest that AEW be successful. Well, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Like, that is a gigantic strike against Tony Khan. The fact that he could not get these guys to work it out, because one party, Punk, clearly wanted to work something to try to make some money out of it. Like, he was clearly the aggressor the first time around. But man, time and money should heal all wounds in this. And if the Bucks can't get on with it, then you got to do something about it. And putting them in separate arenas or putting them in separate sides of the arena on pay-per-view days isn't the way to do it. Excuse me. Letting these problems fester doesn't solve anything. Running away from issues doesn't fix them. You have to confront them. You have to confront them and you have to make changes. Because again, Punk, they did make a change. They fired Punk. Jack Perry did something really stupid. There was a fight, and now he's going to wind up with a big push out of it that's probably not going to make for interesting TV at all. But Max will be happy, so who cares? Like, who are the winners in all this? The winners are WWE. They signed a guy that you didn't want, that you kicked out, and you have egg all over your face. Think about that. They got rid of the guy. They fired the guy. They said, we don't want Punk here anymore. He has a problem. He has a cancer. Good luck. And he goes back to WWE, and everybody goes, you screwed up AEW. Can you believe this? And they're right. They're right. How do you lose a public relations battle with a guy that you got rid of? A guy that you publicly said, we can't do this anymore with this guy. And you lost. You lost that public relations battle. Again, it all comes down to the idea that you can't lead, or you're choosing not to lead. Because you can tell me, well, he fired him. He isn't excuse me, he isn't Tony Khan fired Punk. That's leadership. And it's the first step of leadership that Tony Khan has done. But like, I'll be honest with you, are you going to tell me All Elite Wrestling is in a better place than it was before he left? Like, are you going to tell me the TV with Maxwell and Jacob Freeman living out his Attitude Era fantasy camp, it makes for better TV? You're going to tell me that what WWE is going to do with CM Punk is less interesting than the Brochachos? You're lying. You are lying to me, and you're lying to yourself. Like, and that could have all been avoided. Tony Khan is the guy that got CM Punk back into professional wrestling, right? And again, quite frankly, the first comeback is always probably better. And this is the third CM Punk comeback in 2 years. So let's see what the box offices look like down the road. Maybe they will. Maybe we'll do huge business. Who knows? Like, WWE really can't fail right now. Like, they're riding a hot streak, and they've only made it stronger. Like, it's funny because like they didn't need to bring back Punk, but if you look, Raw has stopped growing. Like, for the last year, Raw ratings have been growing, right? It's the only thing on cable TV that has bucked the trend of declining ratings in the face of less homes of cable television. For a solid year, Raw bucked those trends. They aren't anymore. The house show business it's not soft, but it's starting to soften, and you're starting to see the ticket sales are starting to go down. Like, if you just look at WrestleTix, it's not bad. They're not doing dynamite numbers, but when I say dynamite, I mean the AEW dynamite numbers. Like, but they're starting to drop a little bit. What better way to spike your ratings and to spike your live event business before the trends continue than inject CM Punk into that? Now you've got a new monkey wrench thrown in, right? Now things are interesting again. Boom, you fix that. Smart decision. Triple H and Nick Khan got out ahead of the issues, right? Before they became obvious. They smelled it out. I mean, WrestleMania time, things tend to go up anyway, but now you've just ensured that they're going to. You just made your company even more interesting. So kudos to them. AEW, on the other hand, is not. We're doing BOGO tickets where, again, crowds are okay. But I'll tell you something. I sat in the Chicago crowd this past weekend at Dynamite. I was going to do this show about taking my son to an AEW show, and I thought I would feel something coming out of that show. I thought that I would feel strong or negative about that company. And I was going to talk about that. But honest to God, I came out of there feeling very lukewarm to everything. Like I didn't feel like I'd lost the company, but I didn't feel like it had like rekindled. I didn't feel like the Continental Classic rekindled my interest in AEW either. I feel like the AEW crowds have changed this year. Like it's funny, before the show, Tony Khan did a little, hey, who's been here before? Who went to All Out? Who went to this? Who's the first time here? And there's a lot of people for the first time at a Dynamite. So it just tells me that there are not the same crowds at these shows. WWE tonight had a Chicago crowd. I didn't watch the show, but I watched Twitter. I watched the reactions on Twitter. That sounded like a Chicago wrestling crowd, which is not how things sounded on Wednesday. So AEW is super cold right now, right? And Tony Khan only has himself to blame. These are his decisions. When you are the leader, you are the guy at top. It doesn't matter who's doing what. You are in charge. Your decisions have brought us to where we are, right? And now, where are we? Are you in a stronger position now than you were 2 hours ago? Because 2 hours ago, the perception was not as bad as it is now. That's the truth. CM Punk back to WWE makes them look stronger and it makes you look weaker. They have taken two of your biggest stars. Now, realistically, Cody Rhodes is never the AEW champion. Cody Rhodes, for the good chunk of his AEW career, was doing his own thing out of the main event picture. But he was one of your biggest stars. He was WWE, right? And CM Punk was admittedly your biggest star. You said that to us. Now he's back at WWE. Maxwell Jacob Freeman's whole character arc has been the War of 24. Like he's a babyface now, but he wore a robe just a couple weeks ago with 2024 written on it. I think it's hilarious that WWE people leaked that. Yeah, he's been signed. We're not negotiating with him. Hilarious. But that's been his whole thing too. Like this whole thing started with him talking about how in 2024 he was probably going to go to WWE. That was the angle they went with. They had a character on that show telling you that their company wasn't as cool as the other company. And then Cody went and did it. Cody went and jumped over there and became a bigger star than he ever was. Now Punk is back there and he's become a bigger star again, just by showing up again. Right. So like what self-fulfilling prophecy, man. You created this environment. You could have nipped that in the bud and said, no, we didn't want to do the Brian Pillman cosplay, which that's what MJF does now. He just pretends to be wrestlers from his youth that were really cool or from stuff that he read about when he was younger. Like we don't actually do anything original, right? What are you going to do? Are you going to tell me that Pat Buck and Jimmy Jacobs and these guys have the answers, or are these just little worms that weaseled their way up to the top of the promotion as far as like the booking minds go? Like, are you going to? I've watched this promotion the last year, and I can tell you right now, there aren't any good ideas. There aren't any good ideas. The C2 is half-baked. Danielson didn't have a match tonight with Andrade, right? He's hurt. How are you going to work a first-round match in later? You didn't tell us that, right? Stuff like this doesn't make sense. Like you want to do the G1, but you don't really understand how the G1 works. You didn't make a really big deal about this. You didn't have the giant press conference. You didn't treat this the way New Japan does. You're trying to throw a bone to hardcore fans. When I say hardcore fans, there's two ways you can look at that. There's the diehards and the hardcores. Hardcore fans are hardcore wrestling fans. Like they watch all wrestling. They love wrestling. They know what's going on in Japan. They know what's going on. They might not like WWE, but they know what's going on over there. Those are the hardcores, right? And then there's the diehards. Like we used to talk about the stand-up for WWE folks. Now we got a bunch of those in AEW too. Like I joked about my former boss, Amy Nemedy, talking about MJF is the greatest AEW world champion of all time with the most ridiculous thing I ever heard in my entire life. But I mean, those are your diehards. You don't lose your diehards. Even when WWE was doing Seth Rollins versus The Fiend, like you had your diehards who weren't going anywhere, right? It's really easy to turn off the hardcores, right? There's plenty of wrestling for them to latch on to. They don't need one particular company. Their fandom is defined by not being embedded into one particular company. They're the ones that built AEW. They're the ones that sold out your shows in minutes, who didn't need BOGOs. to show up. They're the ones that you're turning off with this stuff. And you know that's how they're going to answer this. They're going to have MJF cut some dorky ass promo on Wednesday that's going to like ooh rough like vaguely mention CM Punk, which kind of makes it interesting because we heard CM Punk's name. Like we got we got an allusion to him on Wednesday, and Malachi Black straight up said his name tonight. So it makes me wonder if they knew something was going to happen or not. I don't know. Who knows? Ultimately, who really cares? Like, but how are you going to? And this is what I want to come down to. This is the whole point of my ramble right here. How, as a leader, do you respond? Because right now you're in a crisis situation. Right, the crisis is you have bad public relations. You have egg on your face. You are no longer the cool company. You lost the cool company to WWE, a company for the last 20 years that has not been cool. That's where you are now. Are you going to try to fight back by doing more of the same? Right? Yeah, it looks like the Full Gear pay-per-view buys were pretty good. Not really good, but pretty good. That's before that the customer base knew that you were going to run a Raw angle throughout the pay-per-view. That got the worst votes for your shows. Let's keep that in mind. Where do you go? Do you make tough decisions? Or do you stay as is? The worst reviewed Dynamite, I believe, ever was that 2019 episode with the Dark Order. By the way, Dark Orders always suck. Don't let anyone tell you different. With that Dark Order attack where like the minions were, remember the one I'm talking about? It was god awful. Then they had a week break and they came back and the company was hotter than ever. And we're just not hotter than ever, but the company started to get hot again with good TV, right? Tony Khan talked about how he had to take everything over again. And it's a different company now in the fact that was only when they had 2 hours of TV. Now they have 5 hours of TV. Right? So what do you do? Do you go with your instincts? Do you listen to your detractors? Do you listen to the people who are telling you the hard truths? Or do you close yourself off? Do you say, well, my inner circle is telling me everything is fine? Because let's be honest, that's what Vince McMahon did for 20 years, and it kept WWE on top. But it wasn't until they got new blood running the show and started doing things in a different way and started challenging some of the tropes that they've been pushing for the last 2 decades that the company started to change for the better. So you got guys like Pat Buck and Jimmy Jacobs doing the, well, this is how Vince would do it. But the guys that are at WWE when it became successful again are still at WWE, right? So why are you listening to people who were there for the instead of, you know what I'm saying? Or why are you even worrying about why do you worry about what WWE does anyway? Now, you just said, well, JD, you just mentioned that this is how they should react. Well, yeah, I did. Maybe I'm being a bit of a hypocrite too. Maybe I'll talk about sitting on a Saudi airline someday. Who knows? But there have been this year, 2023, they've been so reactionary to what WWE has done. Right? This is the company that in 2021 went up against WWE on cable TV and beat them in the demo, which is what we're told what matters, right? They won. They had the answer and they moved away from it. How do you fix that? How do you find your identity again? I don't have the answers to this, right? I don't think you do either. The only person that can find the answers to this is Tony Khan, because quite frankly, it's his problem. These are his issues. When your back is against a wall, as the cliche goes, how do you react? Are you a fight or are you a flight? What I've seen from Tony Khan is a lot of flight. Doesn't like conflict. It's not good. You don't got to be Bill Watson go looking for fights, but I mean, like, I think it would behoove him to figure out a line of attack because you need to win your fans back. Because I'm not saying they're leaving. I'm saying there's a good chunk of them that have lost faith in you and what you're doing because they don't believe in your leadership, because they don't believe in what your company stands for. And quite frankly, I don't even know what the company stands for anymore. if WWE is good and hot, what's the point of a second major American company? And that's what everyone says. It's bizarre because we have major company rivalries, might not be the term, but we have major company competitors in just about everything. We have multiple restaurants. We have multiple sports leagues. We have multiple movies, multiple TV shows, right? We have choice. There's always choice for the consumer. But in the professional wrestling world, it comes down to, well, why do you need another competitor if WWE is good? Right? Well, why do we? If the answer don't like WWE, like I don't like WWE. I don't like the way they tell their stories. I don't like how they do their business. I don't care for their programming. What is left for the fan like but then to just check out? I'm telling you, guys like me, guys who are the hardcores, guys who are willing to buy tickets the moment they got on sale are the ones that W. Where are they right now? How do you get them back? These are the tough questions. And if they're not asking them right now, there's a problem. Perhaps there needs to be a calling. It's what Vince McMahon did, right? Whenever there's been major problems like that, he's gotten rid of people who haven't been doing their job. Man, he fired George Scott. He went ahead and fired even Pat Patterson and Bruce Pritchard from the booking team and put Vince Russo and those guys in favor of it, right? These are things that have happened, right? What's going to happen with AEW? Because this is the first time that they've really faced criticism, right? Real criticism, like harsh criticism from their supporters. And they haven't responded well. But maybe that can change. I think the next 2 months, specifically 2 months, are going to be very interesting. Maybe they'll lay out the plan for the next 10 years for AEW. Maybe not. Maybe it's just a blip in the radar and, we move on and forget any of this ever happened. Right? I'm actually far more interested in how this affects AEW than how it affects WWE. It's like Punk said back in 2011, I'm just a spoke on the wheel. The wheel continues rotating. Yeah, and it does. In AEW, you're not a spoke on a wheel. In AEW, you're a cog in a machine. And when those cogs break, the machine don't work anymore. So where does it go from here? Because right now we've got some broken cogs. How do we fix them? How do you fix them? I ain't doing nothing. No one's paying me. No one's offering my ideas. What's sad is I know a guy who had some ideas that was not listened to. I'll leave that as it is. That disappoints me. But here we are. So what do you think, man? I'm probably being a little over the top tonight, but these are the thoughts that go through my mind on a Saturday night when I should be in sleep. That's all I got for tonight. Tomorrow, actually, when you hear this, it'll be Sunday. So if you have time tonight, come check out Superhero Speak. We're going to talk about, I forget what we're going to talk about tonight, but we'll be live on YouTube. That's at Superhero Speak on YouTube. So I invite you to watch that. Mike and I will be back together this Thursday. Who knows what we're going to talk about then. We're a show that deals with the news of the day. I imagine this is probably still going to be in the news, CM Punk to WWE. But it's so crazy because every Tuesday I talk to Mike, what are we going to talk about this week? And then by Thursday night, 10 different things happen that we got to talk about. So I'm sure some other batshit crazy stuff's going to happen over the next week. But that's kind of how things go over here. Let me know what you think, man. I'm curious to hear what you guys had to say. Are we making a big deal about nothing? Is Tony Khan a failure as a leader? I don't have the answers to any of these questions. I kind of want to know what you think about it, though. So hit me up. Let me know what you think. I'm JD Oliva, and this is my project.
Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you work your A game. Make no rain from the track when we unite and spit. This is an A game, better bring your A game. Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you work your A game. Make no rain from the track.